Hello, welcome. You made it, I made it, we're all here. This is our Carb Smart class. The second Wednesday of the month is when we do this class. So here we are. Thank you for watching if you're watching live here with me on Wednesday at 11, or if you're watching the recorded version later on here on Facebook or on our YouTube channel. Welcome. Please let me know if you're here. I would love to see you. Say hi. Let me know if you have any questions as well, any comments. I should be able to answer any of those if you're here live, or if you type those in, I can answer those later on in a comment back. So today we are talking about carbohydrates, of course. Our more specific topic today, we're going to do a review of last month's topic. We talked about carbohydrate basics last month. So today we're going to do a review of some of the stuff we covered last month for those that may have missed it. And then we're going to talk about how many carbohydrates you should eat in the day. I get asked that often, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. I have my show and tell white paper back here, my highly sophisticated PowerPoint that I will be writing on. It's almost like one of those overhead projectors as a child, but that's what we're doing today because that's the easiest way to do it here. So let's get started. Let me know if you have any questions, any comments while I'm talking. Happy to answer anything that I can. So we're going to start with the review of last month's topic. So carbohydrates, they often get a bad rap, especially when it comes to weight gain or weight management. I hear people tell me very often that carbohydrates are to blame for their weight gain, things like that. But carbohydrates aren't necessarily all bad. Because of the numerous health benefits of carbohydrates, they do have a rightful place in your diet. However, some carbohydrates might be better than others for you, so it's important to learn how to choose the right ones. So let's talk a little bit about understanding carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are one of the three macronutrients. We have carbohydrates, protein, and fat. They are one of the three that are found in our foods and beverages. Most carbohydrates occur naturally in plant-based foods. Plant-based foods have carbohydrates. That's part of their nature, okay? Food manufacturers also add carbohydrates to processed foods in the form of starch or added sugar. They help with taste, flavor, texture, as well as preserving foods. Common sources of naturally occurring carbohydrates are fruits, vegetables, grains, whole grains or not whole grains, legumes, beans, nuts, seeds, and dairy. All those foods contain some amount of carbohydrate, some more than others. There are three different types of carbohydrate within that umbrella. So we talked about the food sources. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about the type of carbohydrate that are in foods. There are three main types. The first is sugar. Sugar is the simplest form of carbohydrate, and it does occur naturally in some foods. Those foods would be fruits, vegetables, milk, or any type of milk products. Those all have naturally occurring sugars. The types of sugars in fruit would be fructose. The table sugar type of sugar would be sucrose, and milk sugar, the sugar in milk, is called lactose. So those that are lactose intolerant can't digest the sugar that is in milk, the lactose. The second type of carbohydrate is starch. So starch is a complex carbohydrate, meaning that it's made of many of those little sugar units bonded together. So sugar is one thing, starch is multiple units together, okay? Starch occurs naturally in vegetables, grains, beans, and legumes. Starch, the complex carbohydrates, that's what we want to eat. Foods that include the starch, those are fine, those are good for us. Sugar is fine for us too in those natural occurring sources. The added sugar is what we want to eat less of, okay? The third category of carbohydrate is fiber, something I love talking about. I teach an entire class on fiber. So fiber is a complex carbohydrate as well. It's included within that. And it does occur naturally in many foods, only plant foods. Fiber is only found in plant foods, not in animal-based foods. So fiber is in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, beans, and legumes. Those all contain fiber. Anything animal-based, dairy, butter, cheese, eggs, any type of meat, poultry, fish, those do not contain fiber. So it is very important to get plant foods in your diet to get that healthy fiber. So those are the three types of carbohydrates. Within that carbohydrate umbrella, we have sugars, starches, and fibers. I don't have any questions so far from anybody on those. So we're going to continue on. We're going to continue on talking about carbohydrates and how they relate to your health. Okay? There are many ways that carbohydrates are beneficial to your health. It is true. I'm going to talk about just 3 of them this morning. First of all, carbohydrates provide energy. Carbohydrates are your body's main fuel source. They are the preferred fuel source. This would be kind of the opposite of the keto diet. A keto diet has more of the fat being your fuel source, but the body's preferred fuel source is carbohydrates, and that is why I don't necessarily recommend a keto diet to most people. The body wants carbohydrates to burn as fuel. It is the easiest thing for our bodies to use as fuel. It's the most efficient fuel source for our bodies, okay? During digestion, sugars and starches are broken down into simple sugars, and those simple sugars are called glucose. That's kind of the base form of our food is glucose. The glucose is then absorbed into your bloodstream where it's known as blood sugar or blood glucose. Okay, from there, glucose enters your body's cells with the help of insulin. That is a hormone that our body releases. And then glucose is used by our body for energy, and it fuels all of our activities, even our brain. If it's going for a jog or breathing, anything, carbohydrates are fueling our activities. Extra glucose that we don't burn for energy is then stored in our liver as well as our muscles. It gets stored there to be used as fuel quickly if needed later on. Or it is stored in our fat cells, and that's what we don't like, right? Okay, so carbohydrates provide energy for all of our body functions, and we need glucose to function, okay? The second health benefit we're talking about today is protection against diseases. There is evidence, many studies, research that suggest whole grains and fiber from our whole foods. So fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, legumes, nuts, and seeds. The whole grains and fiber from the whole foods help reduce your risk of cardiovascular diseases, among other diseases, okay? But cardiovascular disease for one. Fiber can also help protect against obesity and type 2 diabetes. Those are 3 big health conditions, major health conditions that cause all kinds of issues as well as death. So it's okay to eat carbohydrates, the right ones, because they can help protect against these type of diseases. Fiber also is essential for optimal digestive health. You probably have heard that before. It is important to eat enough fiber to make sure that our digestive systems are working properly. Fiber provides bulk for our stools, and it provides, also it helps bring cholesterol out through our stool as well. So many diseases that carbohydrates help with if you are choosing the right type of carbohydrates, right? So those whole grains, beans, legumes, nuts, seeds, fruits, and vegetables. Oreo cookies are a carbohydrate, but they will not have the health benefits that an apple would have, okay? Then the third health benefit we're talking about this morning is weight control or weight management. Evidence shows that eating plenty of fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, nuts and seeds can help you, and beans and legumes, did I mention those? Those can help you control your weight. Their bulk and fiber content aids weight control by helping you feel full on fewer calories. So fibrous foods tend to be a little bit more bulky. So if you think about a salad or any type of vegetables, there's a lot of volume in those, but they have a lot of fiber and a lot of water content, so they don't contain as many calories as maybe the same size as spaghetti or steak, something like that. So contrary to what low carb diets claim, very few studies actually show that a diet rich in healthy carbohydrates leads to weight gain or obesity. So there are many studies that I've been reading about lately. I'm in graduate school, so I'm reading a ton, and there's been a lot of research we've been going through showing different types of diets, and so non-vegetarian or omnivorous meat eating, kind of the regular American diet, comparing different types of diets and how effective they are actually in weight loss specifically, or weight management. And the least effective diet for weight management is the omnivorous, or meat, kind of eating any types of foods. That is the least effective diet for weight management. And as you progress closer and closer towards a plant-based or a fully vegan diet, the weight management is better and better. So the more plant foods that we eat, the more carbohydrates, those plant foods, the fruits, vegetables, beans, legumes, whole grains, nuts and seeds, having those foods as your primary diet components is better for us for many health reasons. As I mentioned, the cardiovascular disease, obesity, and type 2 diabetes, and the weight management just in general. Vegans, vegetarians tend to have better weight management than do non-vegetarians. All right. I should teach an entire class on that one of these days. So we're going to talk now about how to choose your carbohydrates wisely. I've touched on it quite a bit so far in this class in just these few minutes, but we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about the different categories. So as I've said, carbohydrates are an essential part of a healthy diet, and they provide many, many important nutrients. But not all carbohydrates are created equal. As I mentioned, Oreos will not have the same health benefits as an apple would. So here's just a quick rundown of 5 different categories, how to make healthy carbohydrate choices in a balanced diet. So the first one is to emphasize those fiber-rich fruits and vegetables. Aim for whole fruits and vegetables. Fresh or frozen are fine. Some canned can be okay if they don't have sodium added or sugar added. But fresh and frozen typically are fine. There are some exceptions because there are some vegetables that are packaged with like butter sauces and things like that. So plain frozen fruits and vegetables or fresh would be great options. Other options would be dried fruits and 100% fruit juices. However, those are concentrated sources of natural sugar, and sometimes they do actually have regular sugar added into them. So they're more dense in calories, the dried fruits and the fruit juices are. It would be preferable to eat whole fruits and vegetables, or the frozen fruits and vegetables, rather than fruit juice or dried fruit. Some dried fruit is okay, but primarily your fruit and vegetables should come from whole, fresh, or frozen sources. Those whole, fresh fruits and vegetables provide fiber, they provide water and bulk for our stool, and bulk for our stomachs, which help us feel fuller on less calories. The next section of this is whole grains, choosing whole grain foods. Whole grains are good sources of fiber and other important nutrients, B vitamins, iron, other things like that. Refined grains are not. However, refined grains do get those nutrients added back into them typically. Refined grains go through a process that strips out all of the natural nutrients in them and all of the fiber, or most of the fiber, most of the nutrients, and then they often will add it back in artificially. So it is better to just eat the whole versions of things. An example would be like brown rice versus white rice. So the brown rice is full of all the nutrients and the fiber, whereas white rice has been processed, so those things have been removed. Oftentimes they will enrich white rice, put all those vitamins and minerals back in. It would be best to just eat the brown rice. I love white rice, so I understand people wanting to eat white rice rather than brown rice. I like white rice better than brown rice. So it's kind of a balance between choosing whole grains most of the time and having some of those refined grains if you want the smaller percentage of the time. It is recommended, I believe, by the USDA that half of your whole grain or half of your grains should be whole grains. Okay, whole wheat bread, whole wheat pasta, whole wheat tortillas, brown rice, quinoa, any of those types of grains, oats. Half of your grains should be from that category, right? The other half can be white rice, but more of the whole grains, the better. All right, the third, eat more beans and legumes. I love beans. I eat them every day for every meal. I love beans. They're so good for us. So legumes really does include beans, peas, and lentils. Any of those are great. Those are among the most versatile and nutritious foods available. They're typically low in fat. There's really hardly any fat naturally in beans, peas, and lentils. And they are high in lots of nutrients, including folate, potassium, iron, and magnesium. And they also contain beneficial fiber. Tons of fiber in beans and legumes. Lots of good fiber in there. Legumes are also a good source of plant-based protein. They can be a healthy substitute for meat, and they don't contain any saturated fat and cholesterol. So protein sources from animals contain cholesterol and saturated fat typically, whereas the plant-based sources like beans and legumes do not contain saturated fat or cholesterol. The fourth category of carbohydrates for healthy choices is low-fat dairy products. This is if you are a non-vegetarian or a vegetarian. Obviously, vegans wouldn't be eating dairy products, but non-vegetarian and vegetarian, if you're doing dairy products, you want to choose the low-fat or non-fat versions. So milk, cheese, yogurt, any other dairy products in that realm. They are good sources of calcium and protein and many other vitamins and minerals, but it is helpful to do the low-fat or non-fat versions just to make sure to limit the calories, because those whole milk dairy sources tend to have more calories, as well as more fat, including saturated fat. There is saturated fat in dairy products. So whole milk, not as good of a choice for the most part as non-fat or fat-free. Claudia just had a question. Aren't non-fat high in sugar? Yes and no. So yogurt, oftentimes a non-fat yogurt, if it's a regular yogurt, might be higher in sugar to make it more palatable for people. But if you're doing like a Greek yogurt, a non-fat Greek yogurt, that would be a better choice. And it depends on what flavor you're choosing. If you're doing a plain yogurt, a plain non-fat Greek yogurt, or a plain non-fat yogurt, those won't have much sugar. Every type of dairy naturally has lactose sugar in it. So if you look at a carton of milk, it will have at least 12 grams of carbohydrates in it, and that will include sugar, because sugar and carbohydrates are naturally found in dairy. I haven't looked at a non-fat milk carton in quite a while, so I can't speak to this with 100% authority, but typically non-fat milk doesn't have any more sugar in it than whole milk. I don't think they add any sugar to milk. Again, don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure all dairy, generally all milk, is going to have at least 12 grams of carbohydrates, which includes sugar, and yogurt is going to have a wide range of sugar in it, depending on the type that you're buying, right? There's not a hard and fast rule that all non-fat dairy has sugar in it. It will be important to read the nutrition labels to see if it has any sugar that is added into it, right? Added sugar. Again, milk does contain sugar naturally, so you want to look for added sugar in that dairy. I also want to mention that dairy is not a requirement. It is not absolutely necessary to consume dairy products to have a healthy diet. You can, oh, you're welcome, Claudia. You can get all the nutrients you need without consuming dairy, okay? There are tons of dairy alternatives these days, almond milk, soy milk, even yogurts and cheeses that are not dairy as well. Those are fine options, but again, you don't have to eat dairy to get calcium and protein and all the other nutrients. There are those things in other foods, other plant-based foods, okay? But if you are gonna choose dairy, non-fat or low-fat would be the way to go. All right, finally, within this topic of choosing the best carbohydrates, limit added sugars. I've kind of touched on that a little, but added sugar in small amounts probably isn't that harmful to us in small amounts. But there is no health advantage to consuming any amount of added sugar. Any added sugar we eat, it's not doing us any favors. It may not harm us in small amounts, but we don't want to eat a lot of it because in larger amounts, it can have health benefits or non-health benefits. The Dietary Guidelines for Americans recommends that less than 10% of your daily calories come from added sugar, which is actually quite a lot if you think about that. Other places you'll see the recommendation, I believe, for, I want to say for women is, I think it is less than 4 teaspoons a day. I want to say that's right, I think. It's about 16 grams of added sugar. Less than 16 grams of added sugar for women, and for men, less than 24 grams of added sugar. I'm pretty sure that's correct. I'll have to check my facts on that. Any amount of added sugar is not going to do us any favors, but especially large amounts of added sugar, definitely not doing us any favors. So if you look, for example, we were talking about yogurt. If you look at a container of like a regular Yoplait yogurt, the red label kind, those can have anywhere from like 30 to 50 grams of sugar in just that yogurt. And most of it is not the natural sugar, okay? Most of it is the added sugar. And that is so much sugar. That is your entire amount, your daily allotment of added sugar in just that little 6-ounce yogurt cup. So it is very important to be mindful of your added sugar. Fruit and dairy are not the natural sugar in fruit and dairy. That is not added sugar. So an apple, not added sugar. A plain cup of milk, not added sugar. Apple pie has added sugar in it. Chocolate milk would likely also have added sugar in it. Okay. Any questions about that? If not, we're gonna move on to talk about how many carbohydrates you should or could eat in the day. All right, so this is where I'm gonna use this. Hopefully, we'll see. Maybe it won't go as well as I'm planning. So, how many carbohydrates do you need? I get asked this often in the healthware office. The Dietary Guidelines for Americans recommend that carbohydrates make up 45 to 65% of your daily calories. I'm going to write that up here. I think you can see me. 45 to 65% of your daily calories, right? So, what does that mean in actual food terms? So that's what we're going to talk about. If you were to consume 2,000 calories a day, so perhaps a typical male diet, if you were to consume 2,000 calories a day, that would equate to about 900 to 1,300 calories coming from carbohydrates. What does that actually mean? That translates to about 225 to 325 grams of carbohydrates a day. I'm going to write that down just to illustrate. So if you were to eat 2,000 calories in a day, right? 2,000 calories in a day, that would equate to approximately 225 to 325 grams of carbohydrates, okay? Which is quite a big range, right? 45 to 65% is a large range. So it depends on the person, depends on what your goals are, what's going on for each individual. So someone who is trying to lose weight, perhaps, might want to aim on the lower end and have higher protein, right? Someone who's maybe an athlete, exercises often and needs the carbohydrates to be fueling their exercise would possibly aim for the higher end of that. So with this, what would that actually mean kind of in a meal or throughout the day? If we took this range, the 225 to 325 grams of carbohydrates per day, that would equate to approximately 75 to 108 grams of carbohydrates per meal. That's if you were to eat 3 meals in a day. So let's go with 75. Let's go with this lower number. Someone maybe who's trying to lose weight, eating lower carbs a little bit and a little bit higher protein, trying to maintain that muscle mass while you're losing weight. If you were to have 75 grams of carbohydrates for your 3 meals, that would equate to the 225. 75 grams of carbohydrates. What that looks like in food terms, I have got a couple examples. So 1 meal of 75 carbohydrates, that would be 1 cup of rice and 1 cup of beans. That together is 75 grams of carbohydrates. Another option would be 2 slices of bread and 2 tablespoons of regular jelly on that and a cup of milk. That would be 75 grams of carbohydrates approximately. Another example would be a cup of oats and 1 large banana and 1 tablespoon of honey. That also would be the equivalent of 75 grams of carbohydrates. So it depends on what type of carbohydrate you're choosing to make up your carbohydrates, right? So with certain things like vegetables, you can eat way more volume for those 75 carbohydrates or for those 225 carbohydrates. You can eat way more vegetables as compared to maybe an In-N-Out burger and fries, right? Smaller amount of food versus a larger amount of food, depending on the carbohydrate density. Another example, so this would be for someone eating 2,000 calories a day. Maybe that's kind of more of like typical guy who doesn't exercise a ton. 2,000 calories a day, perhaps. That's just a rough estimate. For a woman, more like 1,600 calories a day could be a typical amount of calories. So if we had 1,600 calories in one day, how many carbohydrates would that be? If we're doing 45 to 65% of our calories as carbohydrates, that would be between 720 and 1,040 calories, which doesn't mean very much to most people. So we like to talk about it in grams. So that would be the equivalent of 180, let me check my paper good, 180 to 260 grams of carbs in a day, right? Slightly less. If you're a woman, eating 1,600 calories, trying to lose weight but maintain your muscle mass, eating on that lower end with a little bit higher protein would be ideal. Or if you're 1,600 calories, that's what you're eating, and you're active, doing exercise, and you need the carbohydrates to support exercise, getting that energy, the higher end of things. In a day, if you ate 3 meals a day, that would equate to about 60 to 87 grams of carbohydrates in each of your 3 meals. So what that would be in food terms, we're gonna go with the 60 grams of carbohydrates, that lower end, 60 grams of carbohydrates at 3 meals in the day. That would be about 1 cup of rice and a half cup of beans, approximately, or 2 slices of bread and 2 tablespoons of regular jelly on them, or 1 cup of oats and 1 large banana. Any of those 3 combinations, that would be about 60 grams of carbohydrates, okay? And that would be 1 meal. Hopefully all of that made sense. It's a lot of numbers, right? 45 to 65%, that's what the recommended range is for our carbohydrates. And it is going to be different for every person. We all need and eat different amounts of calories in the day, but it is recommended, it's okay to eat a decent amount of carbohydrates in the day. And as we talked about just before, the type of carbohydrates are what we really want to be mindful of making up that 45 to 65%. So when you're reading your food labels, food packages, remember that you can find the carbohydrate amount in that nutrition facts panel. Look for that. Sometimes they even have added sugar on those these days. The labels will show you the total carbohydrate on one line. That includes those 3 things we talked about before, the starches, the sugars, the fibers. Total carbohydrate includes all of those. And then sometimes, most labels, they will list out the sugar and the fiber separately. And like I said, sometimes they'll even list out the added sugars in as well. There is one final way. This is a lot of numbers. Most of us aren't doing all these calculations every day that we're eating. So there is an easier way to figure out how many calories, how many carbohydrates really, to eat, just kind of an estimated way. So this is the plate method. This is one of the things recommended by the American Diabetic Association that helps manage carbohydrate intake. Counting carbs, this sort of thing, counting carbs, that can be relatively overwhelming for some people and not totally necessary for those who don't have diabetes. So regular folk may not necessarily need to be counting all of their carbohydrates every day. A simpler way to manage our carbohydrates and just our overall intake actually is to use the plate method. And that is a portion control tool. I've talked about it before in some of these classes here online, and that uses a visual guideline to help you plan your meals. I just realized my plate's in the closet back there. I was gonna show you. But the plate method, we'll talk about the plate method at least. Actually, I could draw you a picture of the plate method. So here is our plate, and we're dividing it up, okay? You want half of your plate to be non-starchy vegetables. Non-starchy vegetables contain significantly fewer carbohydrates and calories than the other types of vegetables, other types of foods. So half of your plate you want to have of those non-starchy vegetables. Another quarter of your plate you want to have as lean proteins. So that could be eggs, egg whites, chicken, fish, and any of the plant-based sources. So beans, tofu, those sorts of things, right? Non-starchy vegetables, 1/4 is your lean proteins, and then 1/4 is your purely carbohydrate foods. Rice, pasta, potatoes, anything like that. That would go there in your little quarter section. Doing this My Plate method can help you really stay managed on those carbohydrates if you're trying to be mindful of those, because it helps with the visual keep things much more managed. Making sure that vegetables are the primary food on your plate, with smaller amounts of those other supporting foods, the proteins and the carbohydrates, right? You can also have an additional optional serving on the side of dairy or fruit in that meal. So that would, I think online, this is how they have it. It's kind of like, whoop, there's your little dairy or fruit over there, your little serving, right? So that would be like a cup of milk or 1 apple or 1 orange, something like that. So that's the My Plate method. Couple methods to determine how many carbohydrates that you should be eating or how to keep it managed, okay? Hopefully those both made sense. The bottom line is that learning what your nutrient needs are and being mindful of portion sizes, whether it's with carbohydrates, proteins, fats, it's very useful for weight management, weight control, blood sugar management, and our overall health. We do need to be mindful of our nutrition and what we're putting into our mouths. If you need or want more detailed guidance on any of this, with meal planning, with reaching your weight loss goals, your blood sugar management goals, please schedule an appointment with us at the Healthware office. We are happy to help you reach some of these goals, to help you understand this way, to help you understand your nutrition and what would be best for your overall health. That was a lot of information today, wasn't it? I think we made it through everything. Let me know if you have any more questions. No one's typed anything else in there since I've been talking and since Claudia asked her question. So hopefully we covered everything all right. But do let me know if you have more questions. Just type those in. I'll be able to see those after this class ends. So happy to answer anything. Thank you to everyone watching. We had a nice group here today, which was always exciting. Until next time, everyone, do let me know if you have any requests of specific topics you'd like covered in this Carb Smart class. I'm happy to teach you what you want to learn. Other than that, I will see you all next week for another week of classes. Weight management class is next week. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Bye.